Hello everyone. Many of you have asked us to support Kerberos. In this video, I'm very excited to announce that we're delivering Kerberos support in Tableau Server version 8.3, starting with Microsoft SQL Server, Microsoft Analysis Services, and also Cloudera Impala. My name is Nilesh Kamkolkar, and I'm a product manager here at Tableau. Kerberos is a network authentication protocol that uses tickets as a way to allow computers on a network to authenticate and communicate securely, even if the network is not fully secure. Kerberos was originally developed by MIT in the 1980s. Today, it's a mature, widely used, architecturally sound security authentication technology that is suitable for modern distributed systems that operate over non-secure communication networks. Also, Kerberos is integrated into many popular operating systems and enables enterprise-level interoperability. My goal for this video is primarily to introduce to you how Tableau Server is supporting Kerberos and further extending its existing enterprise authentication support such as AD integration and support for SAML. Let's start by reviewing what I have for my environment. In my lab, I have a domain controller that's managing a domain called Kerb. It's running Windows 2008 R2. I have Tableau Server version 8.3 on the same domain. I also have a workstation machine that is running my Tableau desktop and the Chrome browser. Lastly, I have Microsoft SQL Server 2012 running in the Kerb domain as well. For the walkthrough, the SQL Server has 4 different users: Kerb user 1, Kerb user 2, Kerb user 3, and 4. And in the test v1 database, each of the different users are authorized to have different levels of access to the tables. As you can notice, Kerb user 4 has no access to any of the tables in test v1 database. Let's first walk through the experience of logging into Server and seeing the end-to-end scenario work, and later we'll walk through the configuration. Here you're seeing that I'm logged into Windows as Kerb user 1, and that's the Windows authentication prompt for me to log into Server. And in this case, note that with Kerberos authentication, I'm directly logged in without being prompted by Tableau Server. Under the hood, we're now using Kerberos tickets to do the authentication directly to AD. Let's go take a look at a particular workbook that was previously authored and published to this server. It's Kerb user 1 authored workbook. One thing you'll notice new is that the icons show user-specific views. When I click on the view, because I'm logged in as Kerb user 1, I'm able to see all the data that I've authorized for in SQL Server. I can interact with the data, I can navigate to different sheets, I can exclude data from that particular view, even save my own customized view as Kerb user 1. And in this particular case, the viz was based on the test v1 database using tables that Kerb user 1 had access to, or was authorized to, excuse me. And what I can see here is essentially all of the standard flows that I've done with Tableau Server except using Kerberos. When I sign out, I can go back and provide the username and password as usual, but in this case, let's go back and use the Windows credentials. So clicking on Kerb user 1 should automatically log me into Server. And there we have it. So I'm automatically logged into Server again, leveraging the Kerberos tickets that were created behind the scenes. Let's log in as Kerb user 4 to explore the end-to-end scenario first. As I log in to Kerb user 4, I have to provide my credentials because the current Windows login is Kerb user 1, right? So logging in to Kerb user 4, let's go back to the same workbook we looked at earlier. And this was authored by Kerb user 1, and again, the user-specific views don't let me see a preview of the data because I don't have authorization to it. And in this particular case, you'll see the error that the database threw here saying that essentially As the currently logged in user, which is Kerb user 4, I don't have access. I'm not authorized for the data set that that particular view is using. So this demonstrates how different users authorized for different data sets on a backend database like SQL Server are able to view only the data that they are authorized to with full integration with Kerberos. Now that we've seen the full end-to-end scenario, let's look at how desktop single sign-on would work, and let's see how an author might publish content with Kerberos configuration. So I opened my desktop and noticed that I'm logged in as Kerb user 1. I've authored this workbook. I'm connected to the Starbucks database in the back end, the test v1 database, and all the related tables. I connect to server and I'm instantly logged in as Kerb user 1. I don't have to provide any credentials here because I'm already logged into Windows as Kerb user 1. When I publish the workbook, it is the same standard flow that you're familiar with already. When you go to the Authentication tab, you will see a new choice here called Viewer Credentials. For you to leverage Kerberos, you have to publish your content with Viewer Credentials enabled. And publishing the content in that way makes sure that the server understands that it has to use the Kerberos mechanism to make sure that the user has authorization. The preview window again has the user specific views, so no data authorization leaks can happen. And when you go back to the server, you'll go back and see the same views that you had seen earlier in the full walkthrough. So essentially publishing a workbook to server is the same exact flow that you had before, except you choose viewer credentials. So now that we've seen the end-to-end experience of how delegation works and also how you can publish content with desktop, let's see how you can configure Tableau Server for Kerberos in this section. So let's go ahead and launch Tableau Configuration UI. If you've administered Tableau Server before, you're already familiar with this. In this particular case for Kerberos, we're running Tableau Server as Tableau Run As Account, which is a user account on the Kerb domain. And on the Kerberos tab, when you flip over, you get to enable or disable Kerberos with a checkbox. When you enable Kerberos, there's 3 key steps that you have to go through. First, you have to export a Kerb config file. Essentially what we're doing in this particular file is trying to make it easy for you to provide a script to your domain controller administrator, your AD administrator, so that they can run the required configuration on the domain controller. This is a very typical configuration that's required to set up Kerberos. You then hand over that script to your domain administrator who executes the configuration script. Let's explore what's in the Kerb config script. It has some comments that explains to you what it does and what it executes, the commands it executes, and some links that point you to more information about the setSPN and KTPass utilities. When you run the script, you have to provide the password for the Tableau Server Run As User account. This is used in generating the key tab file. Essentially what the script is doing is setting up the service principal names for a couple of services here as the Tableau Run As User account. And it also runs KTPass command to create the key tab file by passing in your Tableau Server Run As User account's password. So you can give the script to your domain administrator. After they run it, they'll provide you the key tabs file, which is essentially a binary file. You copy that file to your server location and provide that location in step 3. Lastly, we've tried to make it again more easier by allowing you to test the configuration within the Tableau Server configuration window for Kerberos. When you test the configuration, we'll check if the SPNs are set correctly and if you have any services configured for delegation. Note that when you have Kerberos enabled, automatic login, if you had it configured earlier, would then fall back to use Kerberos, essentially. While Kerberos configuration can be challenging oftentimes, we've tried to make the step-by-step approach of how a Tableau Server administrator can go through the Kerberos configuration. Step 1, after you enable Kerberos configuration with the checkbox, step 1, you essentially create or export the config file, which is a batch file. You give that to your AD administrator to run on the AD box. Step 2, the domain administrator runs that on the domain controller box. Step 3, you get a key tabs file, which is essentially a binary file that you copy onto your server. And you provide the location of that particular file to Tableau Server in step 3. And what we're doing under the hood is essentially making a copy of that key tab file in the proper location that server needs access to. And lastly, you can test for the configuration by just checking that SPNs are set up correctly and that you have services that you are set up for delegation as well within your Active Directory delegation configuration. All right, it's time to wrap up this video. With this video, you've seen the introduction to Kerberos, where we saw desktop and browser-based single sign-on. In the end-to-end walkthrough where we began the video, you saw delegation, where KERB-user4 could not access data that KERB-user1 was authorized to in SQL Server. One area I couldn't touch on is smart card authentication, which is something that is enabled with Kerberos as well. And also, lastly, you've seen the guided configuration that we've introduced in Tableau Server to allow you to minimize errors when you're configuring Kerberos for Tableau Server. A quick disclaimer that this recording is made during the beta time for 8.3, so eventual features may vary ever so slightly. Please be mindful of that. And with that, this is Nilesh Kamkolkar with Tableau Software signing off. Thank you very much.